Hello everybody, this is Kirby over Yonder, and welcome to the first episode of my new series, Rot or Rebirth. In this series, I take a look at a cartoon with at least 6 seasons, and go through the history of it, talk about what kind of changes that they made, and my opinions on those changes, and determine whether or not I think the show rotted or was rebirthed. The first episode is going to be on Cartoon Network's Adventure Time, so let's get into it. The original pilot for Adventure Time was pitched to Nickelodeon twice in 2007, however they declined it both times because they thought the show was quote-unquote too weird. You know, the same network that did a SpongeBob episode where he eats a drugged-up Krabby Patty and starts hallucinating a giant hamster that tries to eat him. Yeah. To be honest though, I actually am glad that Cartoon Network picked up Adventure Time instead of Nickelodeon. If it was on Nickelodeon, the show would have either gone on forever without changing in any way, like SpongeBob, or have gotten cancelled after season 1 or 2 like Invader Zim. As for the pilot itself, I think it does a decent job capturing the spirit of the show, though in a less polished and more simplistic way, even more simplistic than season 1. To be honest, it's not really that different from the show itself, outside of the art style change as well as the change in voice actors. Outside of John DiMaggio as Jake, all of the characters have different voice actors in this, although Finn is voiced by Zach Shada, who is the brother of Jeremy Shada. They switched to Jeremy in the show itself because by that point Zach didn't quite have his puberty voice anymore, while Jeremy did, and they wanted Finn to sound more like he was going through puberty. But anyways, this pilot clearly had a lot of potential behind it, of which Cartoon Network saw. Also, I cannot believe that Abraham Lincoln living on Mars is an actual thing that became canon within the show itself. I mean, I'm not complaining, but like... okay. So after Cartoon Network had recently committed suicide in 2009, they premiered Adventure Time in 2010, and that changed everything. Season 1 of Adventure Time is very different from the rest of the series. It wasn't focused on the lore, the story, the character development, the symbolism, or really anything outside of just being a wacky and fun cartoon. By the way I'm wording this, it sounds like it should be a bad thing, but I honestly don't think there's a better way this show could have started out. I feel like it was important for us to be immersed into this world before the show started dropping those heavy themes and character development and lore onto us, because we can't really get invested in all that without just being naturally introduced to the characters and the world. And I think Season 1 succeeds at this very nicely. One thing this season really has going for it is the world building. The world building in this season is really good. We get to see a bunch of different places in Ew, and although it is later explored upon more in later seasons, they definitely laid the groundwork in Season 1. In terms of episode quality, this is probably one of the most consistent seasons of Adventure Time. Most of the episodes this season are just solid, and in my opinion, this is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because there really aren't any episodes this season that I consider bad. There are a few meh episodes in there, like Freak City and Gut Grinder, but again, nothing flat out bad. The downside to this is that, in my opinion, there aren't really that many episodes that I think go beyond being solid. There are a few, like What Is Life, Ocean of Fear, and What Have You Done, but that's really about it. Though I don't want to be too down on this season, because even though most episodes are just solid, there's nothing really wrong with just being solid. It's just that the show itself became much more than that in its later seasons. I do really enjoy Season 1 of Adventure Time, just not quite as much as most of the other seasons. So after having a solid first season, let's explore the changes that were made in Season 2 of Adventure Time. I think the best way to describe Season 2 of Adventure Time is that it's sort of a soft reboot to Season 1. It's still very wacky and has a lot of the aspects I liked in Season 1, however I feel like the tone is a lot slower. Though I don't mind this change, as I enjoy just seeing Finn and Jake relax and hang out. It's cool that we just get to see some downtime before and after the adventure. Season 2 also started introducing certain story arcs that would become more important as the series progressed. Susan Strawn introduces the human arc. Go With Me introduces Marceline and Princess Bubblegum's relationship. Crystals Have Power introduces Jake's relationship with his father Joshua and his brother Jermaine, as well as following up to the cliffhanger at the end of the Season 1 episode Tree Trunks. It Came From the Nightosphere introduces Marceline's relationship with her father Hudson Abadir. And most importantly, the season finale, Mortal Folly and Mortal Recoil, introduces the Lich, the main villain of the series. But what's really great about this season is the fact that while it does introduce all these new stories, the show still remains fun. At the end of the day, it is still about Finn and Jake. And most of the episodes still are just one-off Finn and Jake adventures. And the adding of these story elements feels like a natural evolution as opposed to just being forced. Honorable mentions to the episodes Death and Bloom and The Eyes in particular for being two of the funniest episodes of the entire show. Personally, I think Season 2 is better than Season 1 in pretty much every way. While I admire Season 1 for having great world building and overall just being fun, I think Season 2's world building is much stronger. This is also when the characters really started feeling like themselves, particularly Finn and Marceline. Obviously the characters continued to develop in later seasons, just that the characters did feel a little bit off in Season 1. So now that we're done with Season 2, let's see how Season 3 continues to evolve the universe of Adventure Time. And by evolve, I of course mean perfect. Season 3 is a fantastic season. It perfectly blends the silly and fun elements of the first two seasons with the darker elements of the later seasons. This very well might be my favorite season of the show, as it introduces a ton of lore and yet is still really fun. Plus, it has a ton of my favorite episodes, such as Insidium. A great introduction for Flame Princess, has two really catchy songs, and a wonderful combination of sad and fun. Thank You, a very charming episode starring two characters we have never seen before, but have very nice chemistry and has a really good story to it. No One Can Hear You, one of the darkest episodes of the show. It has a very creepy and isolating vibe to it, however it's a very intriguing story. Hitman. Just like Death and Bloom, this is one of the funniest episodes of the show. That beginning where Finn and Jake ground Ice King is one of the funniest scenes in the entire show. And the Scorcher character is great too. And of course, Tom Kenny just nails it as Ice King. Dad's Dungeon. A very interesting look at the relationship between Finn and his adoptive dad, Joshua, as well as just being a very fun adventure with a very touching ending. Holly Jolly Secrets. The Ice King secret tapes are really fun to watch, and I love just seeing Finn and Jake hang out. And of course, that ending hits really, really hard. I always make sure to watch this episode around Christmas time. But of course, my favorite episode of the season is What Was Missing. I absolutely adore this episode. Although it does sort of take the adventure out of Adventure Time, it's a really interesting character study between Finn, Jake, Marceline, and Bubblegum. And because the characters are just hanging out, we really get to see how they feel about each other. While Go With Me was the episode to establish the relationship between Marceline and Bubblegum, What Was Missing was really the one that made people want to start shipping the two. And of course, both of the songs are fantastic, easily two of the best songs of the entire show. I also really like the visuals with all of the red rocks. It's a really nice looking episode. I love this episode. It's easily one of my top 3 favorite episodes of the entire show. And those aren't even all of the really great episodes from this season. Much like with Season 1, this season has absolutely no bad episodes. But unlike Season 1, there's a good chunk of episodes from this season that are really good. In fact, there are really only 2 episodes from this season that I'd consider to be just meh. Those being The Monster and the Fiona and Cake. I know I'm gonna get some flack for that, but I never really found the Fiona and Cake episodes to be that interesting. They always felt like just kind of a bland version of the show itself to me. Though I do really like the song as well as the visuals that accompany it, as well as the twist that it was Ice King's weird fanfiction all along. But besides that, I could never really find myself getting invested into the story of this episode. Sorry, I know there are people who really love this and all of the other Fiona and Cake episodes, however, I'm just kinda meh on it. But besides those 2, every episode from this season ranges from decent to phenomenal. This season takes a lot of risks, and they all really pay off. The Adventure Time team really could have played it safe for this season. The show was already very popular, so they really could have just kept it the same as Season 2, but instead they expanded upon Season 2 and delivered one of the best seasons of Adventure Time. So, was Season 4 able to maintain this quality, or did things start going downhill? Let's find out. Season 4 was kind of just business as usual for Adventure Time. Though the season does introduce more lore onto the series, as a whole it doesn't feel super different from Season 3. A major theme throughout this season is Princess Bubblegum not being shown in the best of light. She's kind of shown as being a cruel dictator, particularly in episodes like Goliad and You Made Me. Not everybody's crazy about the changes that were made to PB's character, but personally, I really like them. I feel like her character was kinda bland in the first 3 seasons, so making her more morally gray makes her really interesting. Another element that gets introduced this season is Finn's new girlfriend, Flame Princess. And I honestly think their relationship could have been handled better. I'm not talking about what happens in Season 5, that's a different story, but I feel like with this season we could have gotten more episodes related to their relationship. Their relationship only plays a role in 3 episodes this season: Hot to the Touch, Burning Low, and Ignition Point. I'm not saying it needed to take over the entire series or anything, but we at least could have gotten a couple more episodes about it. I mean, I like Flame Princess, I think she's an interesting character and all, I just wish she got more screen time. Oh, and I wouldn't dare talk about this season without bringing up its best episode, I Remember You. In fact, I do think I would call this my favorite episode of the entire series. Much like with what was missing, this episode certainly takes the adventure out of Adventure Time, and gives us what is easily the saddest episode of the entire show. So much is said in this episode about the way these 2 characters feel about each other, not just through dialogue, but through subtle things, like the way the characters act and their body movement. How Marceline is frustrated since she knows that Simon is still in there, and yet can't get through to him. And how Ice King has no idea what's going on and is so confused and wants to make Marceline happy, but doesn't know how. And of course, all 3 of the songs are beautiful, especially the one at the end. This episode is easily my favorite of the entire series. To be honest, I do think Season 4 is pretty on par with the quality of Season 3. Much like with that season, this season does a great job balancing the lore with the silliness. It still has that fun aspect to it that all of the other seasons thus far have had. And the season also does have a lot of my favorite episodes, though if I were to choose between the 2, I think I'd go with Season 3 just a little bit over Season 4. While Season 4 does contain my favorite episode of the entire series, I think the quality of my favorite episodes of Season 3 as a whole are a little bit higher than my favorite episodes of Season 4. Also, while Season 3 had no bad episodes whatsoever, Season 4 does have a couple. Web Weirdos has a few funny jokes, like the fingernail cutaway, but as a whole it's a pretty boring and awkward episode about a relationship that's not very pleasant to watch and is very uncomfortable. And Dream of Love is pretty much the same thing if you replace the funny jokes with the worst song in the entire series. though those are the only episodes this season I would consider bad, and thankfully both of them are pretty early on. The season as a whole is one of the best Adventure Time has to offer, as it does a great job expanding the lore of the series while still remaining fun. And with Season 4 done, let's move on to what is probably the most interesting season of the entire show. Is it interesting in a good way, or is it interesting in a bad way? Let's find out. So Season 5 is the longest season of the show. While the previous 4 seasons had 26 episodes, this season has 52. Because of that, the first half of Season 5 and the second half of Season 5 almost feel like 2 different seasons. Though this is also due to the fact that the creator of the show, Pendleton Ward, had stepped down around halfway through Season 5 because he was just tired of working on the show. Rebecca Sugar also stepped down around this time, though that was to work on Cartoon Network's Steven Universe. She helped write a lot of the best episodes, including What Was Missing and I Remember You. Simon and Marcy was the last episode she worked on, and oh boy, what a way to go out. Simon and Marcy is easily one of the best episodes of the entire show. There's so much world building and atmosphere to this episode, it's just astonishing. And I love seeing Simon struggle to remain sane and protect Marceline. This is easily one of the best episodes of the entire show. I actually think the first half of Season 5 is pretty good. Much like with Season 4, it does a good job balancing the silliness and comedy with the philosophy and deep messages and lore. I wouldn't say I like it as much as I like Seasons 3 or 4, but I still like it quite a bit. Though it's not perfect. Jake the Dog is a pretty underwhelming conclusion to what happened in the previous 2 episodes. BMO Lost is overall a pretty boring episode. Bad Little Boy is a Fiona and Cake episode, so I'm pretty meh on that. And Wizards Only Fools is a pretty annoying episode where Bubblegum keeps constantly screwing things up, never actually does anything to redeem herself, and overall just feels kinda pointless. But those aside, I think this half season is pretty decent, and episodes like A Glitch is a Glitch, Pahoy, and especially Simon and Marcy definitely help bring it up. I wish I could say the second half was as good. Excuse me, but what the hell did they do to Finn this half season? They turned Finn from a likable person who always tried to do the right thing, but also had some flaws and could have some bad judgment, to a completely pathetic and awful jerk. Why would you do that? So, in the episode Frost and Fire, Finn basically has a wet dream about Flame Princess every time she fights the Ice King, so he starts emotionally manipulating her into fighting the Ice King. I have no problems with giving Finn a character flaw, but Finn knows the difference between right and wrong. He should know that what he's doing is awful. It feels like this episode was just made to make Finn look as pathetic as possible, but without properly justifying it. It's also pretty uncomfortable watching Ice King get beat up despite not doing anything wrong. Oh, but that's not where it ends, folks. There's also the episode Too Old, a very creepy episode about Finn trying to get back with Princess Bubblegum in a very uncomfortable way. Cause, you know, it's not like we got an entire episode about the fact that Finn got over Princess Bubblegum or anything, right? Right? There's also a dumb side plot about Lemongrab, and I don't like it. Oh, and there's also the episode Red Throne, where Finn keeps trying to get back together with Flame Princess. It's really creepy and weird, and I don't like it. All 3 of these episodes make Finn look as pathetic as possible, but they completely stretch Finn's character in order to do so, making him completely out of character and do things that he would never do in any other episode. And again, I don't have a problem with giving Finn flaws. The Tower is another episode next season that shows Finn in a negative light, but in that episode we understand why he's like that, because he was emotionally scarred by his father. We don't agree with what Finn's doing, but we understand it, and we have empathy for him. Finn's reasoning in Frost and Fire is completely out of character, and in the other 2 episodes he basically doesn't even have any reasoning. That aside, I don't think this half season is that great. I don't think it's bad, but for Adventure Time standards, it's definitely lacking. Remember how for seasons 3 and 4, I mentioned that they do a very good job of blending the silliness with the seriousness? Well, this half season kinda screws it up a bit. Bot's Prince kinda tries to tell a story, I think, but it's honestly so boring and stupid that I don't care about it. James Star's a really annoying and unlikable character, and then kinda tries to make us feel bad for him at around the ending, but I still don't like him, so it doesn't really work. And Lemon Hope's story also tries to make us feel sympathy for a character who isn't very likable or interesting, and also has some weird dream sequences, and just a lot of stuff that's boring and awkward. Not to mention, this one's a two-parter, so it does feel overly long. I'm not saying this half season doesn't have its good episodes. Dungeon Train is an episode with a very interesting concept, and is both a fun episode and also an interesting look at Finn's character. Bad Timing is probably the most interesting LSP has ever been, with a really cool gimmick and very hard-hitting ending. And Billy's Bucket List is not only a good season finale, but also a good send-off to Billy's character, and has a very intriguing cliffhanger. Look, I don't hate Season 5. I don't even hate the second half of Season 5, but coming after the brilliance that is Seasons 3 and 4, it does feel very underwhelming and disappointing. There are a lot of episodes in here that I just don't like, and while there were episodes before the season that I didn't like, it feels like the number of episodes that I just don't care for in this season are a lot higher than the other seasons, and that's not just because it's double the length. However, there is a season that's actually more divisive than this one, and it's the very next season, so join me in part 2 as we discuss Season 6.